Have you ever sat down and wondered what it's all about?
You mean like the meaning of life?
Yeah, what's the point of all this?
Well, I think that's a question that pretty much every human has thought about since we first became conscious.
It's a pretty big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've been reading this book. It's called The Book of Life. And it tries to answer that very question. It talks about life and the universe and morality and the mind and everything.
Doesn't sound like light reading.
Oh, it's definitely not. But it's packed with these really fascinating ideas. So I thought it'd be cool to share some of the key lessons with you. You up for a deep dive?
Let's do it.
Okay, so lesson number 1. Life might not be as straightforward as we think.
Oh.
Yeah. So the book uses this anecdote about sea urchins to make this point. A scientist did this experiment where they exposed these sea urchins to certain chemicals, and they all swam towards the light. And they did this every single time, like clockwork.
Like they were programmed to do it.
Exactly. And that's where the book introduces this concept called tropism. It's basically when living things have an automatic response to some kind of stimulus.
It's kind of like a reflex.
Yeah, exactly. But it makes you wonder, if even organisms as complex as sea urchins can be controlled by simple chemicals, how much free will do we really have?
Are we all just reacting to things in our environment that we're not even aware of?
Yeah. It's like the idea that we're all just cogs in a giant machine.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me feel a little powerless, if you know what I mean.
I get it. It can be unsettling to think about, but the book doesn't necessarily say that we're completely powerless. I think it's more about recognizing the forces that are at play and then making conscious choices within those limitations.
Okay, so it's not like complete determinism.
Right.
We still have some agency.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to the second big takeaway from the book, which is all about morality.
Oh, okay.
So you know how we have things like the 10 Commandments?
Yeah, of course.
Well, the Book of Life uses the 10 Commandments as a starting point to show how our ideas about what's right and what's wrong are constantly changing.
You mean thou shalt not kill doesn't always apply?
Well, it seems pretty straightforward, but then you think about things like war or self-defense, and it gets a lot more complicated. Human reason plays a big role, and also the context of the situation makes a huge difference.
So our understanding of morality isn't set in stone.
Right. The Book of Life argues that it's constantly evolving and that human reason and the specific circumstances really matter.
Okay, so no easy answers then.
Not really. It's more about encouraging people to think critically about their own moral compass and to understand that what's right or wrong can change depending on the situation.
I mean, that makes sense, but it's a lot to wrap your head around. It makes you think about all those moral rules that we think are absolute and whether you would be willing to break them under certain circumstances.
Interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, let's move on to lesson number 3. This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
This is all about the subconscious mind.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
So the book describes the subconscious as this massive hidden universe that's inside all of us.
Like we only see the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. And this iceberg analogy is actually used in the book. It's talking about how the subconscious has this massive influence on our lives, even though we're not really aware of it.
Okay, so what kinds of things does it influence?
Well, it affects our emotions, but it also controls things like healing. And it's behind all of our automatic reactions. Like when you touch something hot and you immediately pull your hand away, you don't even think about it. It's just your body reacting instinctively.
Yeah.
Well, that's your subconscious at work. The book actually gives the example of a partridge that instinctively crouches down whenever it sees the shadow of a hawk.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's not something that the partridge learns. It's an instinct that's passed down through generations. Part of it's subconscious.
It's incredible how much is happening in our minds that we're completely unaware of.
All right. It's kind of creepy when you think about it. Who's really in control?
Well, that question of who's in control is something that comes up again and again in the Book of Life. I think it's asking us to explore those hidden parts of ourselves and to recognize how powerful the subconscious really is.
Yeah. And one of the best examples of that power is this story that the book tells about a woman who was cured of a phobia by a hypnotist.
I've heard about cases like that.
Yeah. So apparently this hypnotist convinced the woman's subconscious mind that he had removed imaginary worms from her body, and then her phobia completely disappeared.
I guess that just shows you how powerful the power of suggestion can be.
Right. And it's not just about phobias either. The book also talks about how the placebo effect works and how things like hypnosis and even like religious fervor can have these powerful effects on our bodies.
It really makes you question how separate the mind and the body actually are.
Totally. Like maybe our minds are a lot more powerful than we think.
That's a thought-provoking idea.
It is. And speaking of powerful minds, the Book of Life also talks about the concept of genius.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it describes genius as this incredible force that can shape not only an individual's life, but also entire societies.
It's like people who have a major impact on the world.
Exactly. And it uses examples of figures like Jesus and Shakespeare and Victor Hugo to make its point.
People whose work has resonated throughout history.
Yeah. And one of the most interesting things it says is that we might actually be more like Hamlet today because of Shakespeare's work. Like his words have actually changed the way we think and feel about the world.
It's amazing to think about how we're all connected through these shared cultural experiences, shaped by the creative minds of people who lived centuries ago.
It's like we're all part of this giant tapestry, woven together by human creativity. But I'm curious about how these geniuses come to be in the first place. Like, is it nature or nurture?
Well, that's a really big question, and the Book of Life tackles that question head on. It talks about innate talent and the environment, and even the role of chance in creating these extraordinary individuals.
It really is deep stuff. I'm starting to see why they call it the Book of Life. It's like it covers everything.
It's definitely ambitious, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Well, stay tuned, because we're going to keep exploring the Book of Life and all its amazing ideas in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Book of Life.
We've been through a lot, haven't we?
We have free will, morality, the subconscious mind, big topics.
My brain is definitely getting a workout, but I'm really enjoying it.
Me too. It's great to really dig deep into these questions.
It is. It's like I'm seeing the world in a whole new way.
Exactly. And that's one of the great things about thinking about these big ideas. It can really change your perspective. And speaking of perspectives, the Book of Life has some interesting thoughts on how we humans relate to the natural world.
Yeah, I remember this part. He was talking about how we've kind of moved beyond the laws of nature. Like we've created this whole artificial world for ourselves.
That's right. We build houses and wear clothes. We even correct our vision with glasses. We've learned to control our environment in a way that no other animal can.
The book used that example of how we don't just eat the fruits that nature gives us. We cultivate our own varieties. Like we're not satisfied with what nature provides, so we have to improve on it.
It's true. And that raises a really interesting question. If we're no longer subject to the same forces of natural selection as other animals, what does that mean for our morality?
Whoa, yeah. That's a good question. I never thought about it like that before. So what's the answer? Does the book give us like a new set of moral guidelines for this human-made world?
Well, it doesn't exactly give us a rule book, but it encourages us to develop a more sophisticated understanding of morality. It argues that our actions should be judged based on how they impact the well-being of other people and the advancement of society as a whole.
So it's not just about following a bunch of rules.
No. It's more about understanding the consequences of our actions and making choices that are beneficial for everyone involved.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's be honest, humans don't always make the most rational or ethical choices.
That's very true. And the Book of Life addresses this directly with its idea of man as a rebel.
A rebel.
Yeah. It basically argues that humans are naturally rebellious. We're always pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo.
I mean, that's how we make progress, right? We're curious, we experiment, we try to figure things out. That's how we've made all these scientific discoveries and technological advancements.
That's right. But the book also recognizes that this rebellious nature has a downside. If our drive for progress outpaces our moral development, it can lead to systems that are actually harmful to ourselves and to the planet.
It's like we're so focused on building bigger and better things that we forget about the foundation that it all rests on.
Exactly. The Book of Life actually compares this unchecked growth to a cancer. And we can see this playing out today with things like environmental destruction and economic inequality and all the political division. It's kind of a scary thought if you think about it.
It is. It's like we're on this train that's going way too fast and we don't know how to stop it.
And that's why the book's call for a new kind of morality becomes even more important. We need to figure out how to balance our desire for progress with a deep understanding of how interconnected we all are and our responsibility to the generations that come after us.
Okay, so that's the goal. But how do we get there? How do we reconcile our rebellious nature with the need for a way of life that's more sustainable and ethical?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. But the Book of Life offers some possible answers. One of the things it talks about is the importance of developing what William James called a moral equivalent for war.
A moral equivalent for war. What does that even mean?
It means finding outlets for our energy and ambition that don't involve violence and destruction. It's about taking all that rebellious energy and channeling it into activities that encourage cooperation and creativity and the pursuit of knowledge.
So instead of fighting wars, we'd be fighting ignorance or poverty or climate change.
Exactly. Think about how much we could achieve if we put as much effort into solving global problems as we do into building weapons and fighting each other.
That's an incredible thought. It makes you realize just how much potential we have as a species if we could just redirect our energy towards something more positive.
And the Book of Life challenges us to do just that. It's a call to action. It wants us to step up and be conscious creators of a future that's both fair and sustainable.
I'm totally on board with that. But before we start a revolution, I think we need to talk a little more about how this whole mind-body connection actually works. Because if our minds are as powerful as this book says they are, that changes everything.
You're absolutely right. The mind-body connection is a key part of understanding this new morality. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we're back and ready to talk about one of the most fascinating parts of the Book of Life.
You mean the subconscious mind?
Yeah, and how it affects our bodies. I mean, it's like this whole other world inside of us, but we barely even know it's there.
Right. And this is where the Book of Life challenges a lot of conventional thinking about the relationship between the mind and the body. It's asking us to consider that our thoughts and beliefs could actually have a real impact on our physical health.
It's a pretty radical idea, isn't it?
It is, but there's growing evidence to support it. And one of the best examples is the placebo effect. Just believing that something will work can actually make a difference.
Totally. I've always found that so fascinating. But the Book of Life takes it even further. It's saying that our subconscious minds have this untapped potential to heal our bodies and even transform them.
That's right. And the book starts by reminding us that the conscious mind, the part we're aware of, is just the tip of the iceberg. There's this vast hidden universe within each of us, the subconscious mind, and it's constantly at work influencing everything from our emotions to our physical well-being.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about how much is happening beneath the surface.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, if we could learn to tap into this hidden power, what could we achieve?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, the book explores that question, and it presents some pretty compelling evidence that the subconscious mind is way more powerful than we give it credit for.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember that story about the woman who was cured of her phobia through hypnosis?
Yeah, that was a powerful example.
It is. So this hypnotist convinced the woman's subconscious mind that he had removed these imaginary worms from her body, and her phobia just vanished. Poof.
Gone.
Gone just like that. Yeah. It sounds crazy, but the book argues that these kinds of things aren't supernatural or anything. They're just examples of how powerful the mind can be and how it can influence the body in ways that we're only beginning to understand.
I think we tend to underestimate the power of the mind. It's not just about phobias either. The Book of Life talks about how the subconscious is involved in all sorts of things, like healing, for example, and automatic bodily functions. It's almost like the subconscious is the mind of the body, always working to keep everything in balance.
I like that, the mind of the body. It really captures the idea that our mental and physical selves aren't separate. They're two parts of the same whole.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that the subconscious contains the memories and experiences of countless generations. It's like this vast library of ancestral wisdom that we can access if we know how.
Okay, so if we have access to all this ancient wisdom, how do we actually tap into it? How do we use it to our advantage?
Well, the book suggests that practices like meditation can help, hypnosis too, and even certain types of religious rituals. They can bridge the gap between the conscious and subconscious minds.
So it's not just about thinking happy thoughts.
No, it's about developing a much deeper awareness of our inner world and learning how to communicate with the subconscious mind.
Like learning a whole new language.
In a way, yes. And by doing that, by cultivating a more harmonious relationship between the conscious and subconscious, we can unlock incredible potential for healing, for growth, for transformation.
And I guess this all ties back to the idea of a new morality, right? If we can tap into the power of the subconscious mind, then we can create a better world, a more just world, a more sustainable world.
That's exactly it. That's the core message of the Book of Life. It's a call to action. It's challenging us to embrace the power of the mind, to question our assumptions, and to realize that we're capable of so much more than we think.
Well, this deep dive has been quite a journey. We've talked about so many things, from free will to morality to the subconscious mind. And it's left me with a lot to think about.
That's a good thing, I think. To be inspired to think critically about the world and about ourselves, the Book of Life doesn't give us all the answers, but it shows us how to ask the right questions. And ultimately, it empowers us to seek our own truths.
It's a reminder that the journey of self-discovery never really ends. There's always more to learn, always more to explore. So to our listener, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of life. Thanks for joining us on this adventure.